I did realise that actually, this is a terrible story. I realised the other day that actually the first opera I ever saw was my friend Laura's mum was in an amateur production of Carmen. And I don't remember anything about the production, but I do remember finding it like really exciting to go to the opera, and that Laura's mum was on stage was just amazing. But more than anything, what I remember is that we got back to Laura's house and we found her mum's copy of Emmanuel. And we got caught trying to watch it, and we were absolutely So that's kind of weirdly my actual first experience with opera.
This is Port Talbot, a town which in the last 10 years has added over £2.5 billion to the nation's economy in steel alone. But it's fear that lies behind the anger. Fear of unemployment, industrial decay.
I was brought up in a town called Port Talbot in South Wales. It's a very working class town. It's always been a kind of town that's been very beleaguered. But strangely, the one thing that the town always had in spades was absolute love of art. So the great soprano Rebecca Evans is from Pontrevent, which is just up the road from where I grew up, and Richard Burton's from there, and Anthony Hopkins is from there. So uninspiring as an artistic kind of centre in and of itself, it's somehow something in the water that kind of creates all these amazing artists. And I was really lucky that I grew up in a point in time where you could get free music instrument training in school. There was a youth theatre down the road from me, and that was free. People like me who grow up kind of curious as to what, you know, you can possibly do with some costumes and a bit of tinsel and, you know, your favourite Madonna song. You can suddenly kind of imagine a possible world where you could be an artist.
Coming soon on cable, your stereo and TV unite to bring you video music in stereo 24 hours.
I've always been a music obsessive. MTV was just amazing for opening up not just like all this new music, but also MTV used to do amazing interviews with artists, and they used to do amazing interviews with fashion designers, and occasionally you'd see a bit of opera, or you'd see some opera singer kind of collaborate with, you know, Freddie Mercury, as Montserrat Caballé did, and you know, it was a channel that made you feel like anything was possible.
I want my MTV.
Yeah, the first opera I ever saw was then when I was at university. It took me a very long time to actually sit down and watch an opera. And it was actually a film that my brilliant director of studies, Shubha Mukherjee, brought to a seminar a video of the Met production of Ariadne of Naxos, starring Jessie Norman. When Jessie Norman came on stage, it was like you'd been punched in the stomach. She was just unbelievable. You know, the force of this incredible woman. Her soul and her composure and her attitude was just like, it, you know, just punched us all in the face. Extraordinary. Then I didn't really get to see anything live until I went to see Richard Jones's production of Wozzeck at the Welsh National Opera. The production was so modern. There was nothing that didn't exist in outside of the parameters of this incredible world that he created. It felt like, wow, this is everything I've waited for my life to kind of to feel and experience. When I graduated from university, it was like a kind of bug that had got into me to direct shows. I rang WNO and I asked if they would meet me to kind of talk about what it would take to be an opera director. In the meeting, the woman who interviewed me essentially said, I don't think opera is for you. And it's ironic because I now run WNO. So, So instead of kind of going into opera, what I decided to do instead was start to make theatre. So I think looking back, essentially trying to make theatre into opera, it felt like I was always trying to kind of use music as the heart of the storytelling. And I worked with a designer for a very long time called Hannah Clark, who is still one of my dearest collaborators and friends. And so I said, well, let's just make the next show we're making, let's just pretend it's an opera. Lo and behold, Oliver Mears, who at the time was running Northern Ireland Opera, just happened to come and see the show and brought me in for a meeting and said, well, you're an opera director. And brilliantly, he gave me my first opera, which was Cosi tutte at Northern Ireland Opera. and it was probably the perfect opera to start off with. On the first day we met each other to talk about it, Hannah said, why don't we set it in the 1920s? And I think my initial thought was, no, let's do something dark and weird and modern, and this is the trend to do Cosi fan tutte, it must be done, like this dark psychological horror. And so we spent about a year and a half kind of desperately trying to kind of wrangle this dark, scary, psychological Cosi fan tutte, and it just was not working, and we were getting more and more dissolute. I was starting to feel really depressed. I thought, oh my God, my opera career is over and I haven't even made an opera. This is a disaster. And I think she said, well, maybe we should think about that 1920s idea again. And I went, I'm going home to Cardiff and I've had enough. So I kind of got on the tube in Southwark, got off the tube in Paddington, and rang her and said, I know exactly how this all works. And on that one tube journey, every single beat of this 1920s version of Cosi fan tutte had just clicked into place. The idea came from my granddad's love of silent movies. We just thought, well, Cosi would work so beautifully through the medium of silent film language. And I gathered another kind of fellow creative on the journey with me on that, which is Emma Woods, who's a choreographer I've worked with now on every single piece of opera that I've made since I started making opera. She'd worked in musicals, I worked in plays, but neither of us had ever been in an opera rehearsal room before, so we were absolutely clueless to what we were about to walk into the next day. And it was amazing. It's like the moment that rehearsal started and the music started, something in me just felt like, you've come home. That cast was really beautiful and fearless, and the two boys playing Guglielmo and Ferrando, we'd set some really difficult physical challenges, and both of them had been going to the gym a lot. So then when one of them was like, I was like, can you jump over there? Can you jump a bit higher? Then the other one would be like, I can do that. I can beat him. So actually, I think the whole thing kind of really developed this fantastic, competitive, kind of elaborate physicality, which was just perfect for those two characters, and perfect for the show. On the back of Cosi, Ollie had taken over at the Royal Opera House, and he got in touch and he said, how would you like to direct an opera by Handel that everybody thinks is terrible and it nearly killed him and it hasn't been performed for 300 years because it was a total flop? And of course I said, I'd love to do it. It was my first foray into Baroque repertoire. It is not a straightforward piece in any way, shape or form. It's amazing when you work on something like Cosi because it's very much through composed. Mozart tells you when everything needs to happen. There's a beat that tells you that's where that happens, that's where that person falls over, this is where the audience laugh, that's where that person jumps in the air, that's where they cry, that's where they kiss each other. But with working on Baroque repertoire, as the director, I think you have to essentially become the playwright to the piece that exists underneath the libretto, which is the subtext. And that Berenice cast pushed themselves unbelievably hard. Cartwheeling while singing coloratura, the massive amount of fighting and sex scenes and this kind of total kind of visceral performance. And I started to kind of wonder, well, how far can I actually take this? I was talking to Lawrence Cummings from the London Handel Festival at the time. Lawrence and I had worked on Berenice, and it was clear from that point, that Lawrence really wasn't just here to kind of play the keyboard and somehow preserve the sanctity of Handel's music, but he was here to make something that was alive and complete and 100% of a theatrical experience. So me and him started plotting up In the Realms of Sorrow. So I think I spent 3 weeks, about 14 hours a day, listening to every single Handel oratorio I could find, and every single little cantata and every single little thing, and came out the other side of it with 4 pieces that I thought were really interesting. 4 short cantatas. I'd started to kind of wonder whether I could be an artistic director of a company or whether I could move into being a general director, and so I wanted to kind of see if I could come up with a project from beginning to end and create the whole thing and kind of come up with a concept and cast it and work out how it functioned and work out the marketing and, to kind of be across every part of it. We got a little band of 8 people together. We also set ourselves a really difficult target there because we wanted them to also dance as part of the production. And then each of the cantatas was set up as a pas de deux between the dancer and the singer. We rehearsed in the venue, which was an old church, in January, and it was, I think, even now when I think about it, I have PTSD about how cold it was. Especially those poor singers who were half naked and like rolling around and getting sweaty and then freezing. They suffered for their art, but my God, they were absolutely extraordinary. And I felt like it was a performance that could have only come from that level of trust that we had in each other. Often opera is an art form where the content is about incredible vulnerability, but because of the mechanism and the technique and the kind of athleticism that you need to perform opera means that the performers are fundamentally not vulnerable. So I think that's where people really find the art form jarring. But I think if you've just got two people who are vulnerable with each other and able to really connect on stage, then you can kind of achieve anything, I think.